Hi, welcome to Intentional Marriages weekly webinar. My name is Danielle West, and this is my husband, Russ.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
And in the month of March, we've been talking about the weekly check-in.
Yeah, so the first week, we talked about our schedule for the week, which was step one of the weekly check-in. And then step two was, in week two, we talked about our hopes and dreams. And on week three this week, we're going to talk about frustrations and celebrations, which is an interesting and fun topic.
It's probably the hardest part of the conversation, but the most rewarding.
Yeah, and one of the biggest impacts we've had in our marriage is this specific step, talking about our frustrations and celebrations.
Yeah, I would say talking about the frustrations was really nerve-wracking for me because I don't like conflict. The last thing I wanted to do was bring something up. This third part of the conversation is probably the most difficult, but yet very rewarding part of the conversation. And rewarding, oh my gosh, that was a stretch in the beginning because conflict for me, I just want to turn around and run. I don't want to talk about it. I am fine never discussing the subject. But Russ made it extremely safe for me to open up, and it took a lot of practice. This doesn't come easy, but gosh, you guys, once you get this process, it will draw you together like nothing else.
Yeah, it's when nobody really likes conflict, and it's hard to understand that through conflict that we can grow closer to each other if we learn how to manage it in a healthy way. So we're going to try to work on that tonight. What we do each week is with the frustrations is we come together and we commit to emotional safety. So what does that mean? That means that we agree not to be defensive, not to get all angry and lash out or stomp off, but we agree to be emotionally safe and listen to our spouses. Our spouse will say, what have I done? So I'll start off and I'll say, Danielle, honey, what have I done this week? Or have I done anything this week that's frustrated you, hurt you, embarrassed you, angered you, irritated you? What is anything that has hurt you?
Let me get out the list.
There's usually a big list. No. And so she will tell me what I've done. And your first time you do this, you're going to get flooded with getting defensive and say, no, I didn't, or I can't believe you're thinking, I can't believe she's bringing that up. So just remember that their feelings are real and justified, whether we feel they're real or they're justified, right? So we may even think that's not true, and we've got to let her know why it's not true. But if she believes they're true, right, they are true to them. So first thing we do, once again, is we ask, what have I done to hurt you or frustrate you or irritate you? When they give a list or give one out to you, the first thing you want to do is validate their feelings. So, we're going to role play this in a moment, but we want to acknowledge their feelings, let them know that the last thing we want to do is cause those bad feelings. And that's a big, big difference than being defensive and trying to defend ourselves on why we think we didn't do what they said we did. And then the next step is, once we acknowledge their feelings, we'll then ask them, what could we have done differently, or what would they like us to have done differently?
And I love this question.
And sometimes hopefully they'll give us something that we can think we can do the next time we get in that same situation.
This is like coaching each other and helping each other out.
Right. Occasionally she'll tell me something and I'll think to myself, ooh, that's going to be really hard to do. I know I'm going to fail at that next time. So I'll come back and say, that is going to be really, really hard for me to do, and I don't want to set us up for failure when we get in that same situation. So then I'll say, maybe would this work? And then together we'll bounce back and forth till we come up with a joint solution. But once again, that working on a joint solution helps draw you to each other.
Yeah, and even if there's something that you agree to do the next time, and we get into the same situation and you're not able to carry it out or execute it, the fact that we talked about it, the fact that I know how apologetic he was, how remorseful he was about the situation, since we've had that discussion, I'm not near as reactive or angry or hurt because I know we're both trying. And there's a good reason why maybe he couldn't do what I had asked. And it should be more of a desire on our part, not an expectation.
All right. And once again, this is just both trying to understand what's important to each other. And most of the time when we hurt each other, it's tied to our wounds, which we'll talk about in another webinar. But this is one that just the fact that you're validating each other's feelings and listening to each other and trying to come up with joint solutions is amazing how it draws you to each other.
Yeah. So can we show them how not to do it?
Yeah, we'll start out with how not to and then maybe how to do it.
Okay, I have to give an example of myself because Russ had modeled this so well for over a year. I want to say it was probably a year and a half. And he had always asked me if he had done anything to frustrate me. And when I would ask him, he's like, no, everything's good. I'm like, wait a minute, we're having this conversation almost every week. And I'm thinking, okay, I know I'm good, but I know there's got to be some times I'm messing up here, right? So I was getting nervous, like, why isn't he giving me stuff to work on? So finally I said, okay, on this weekly check-in, you've got to bring something to the table. And I learned something really powerful. I learned two things. So we're on the walk and I said, so Russ, is there anything that I've done this week to upset you, frustrate you, irritate you? And he begins to tell me and I'm like, oh, I've done something. And it was such a shock because I'm not used to receiving, right? He hasn't been saying much the past year and a half. And so he starts to tell me, you know, this is what happened and what you did. And I flip my head around. I'm like, no, I did not.
Hence the reason I wasn't bringing stuff up.
And he's like, this doesn't feel safe to me. And he had said he felt like he was walking on eggshells if he were to bring things up. And I thought, no, I'm easy to talk to. And then I pulled that. So I want to show you through this example that even though he modeled it really well for me and was a super safe person for me to vent and say, this bothered me this week about you, the minute he shared it about me, oh my gosh, defenses shot straight up.
So we've worked very hard on this and it's taken years. And when you first do it, it's easy to get flooded and get defensive. And if you do, just pause. Instead of escalating, if it start to escalate and going back and forth, then just pause, take a break, go away, and then come back once you calm down and try to re-engage. And once again, focus on the other person's perspective instead of trying to be right. I'm the king of wanting to be right. So that's always my hardest thing. If I think she's wrong in what she's saying, then I'm immediately trying to, my brain wants to convince her why she's wrong, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do. So it takes practice, but I promise you, we use this weekly check-in because we know we're going to come to it and we can be safe versus just in the moment trying to deal with it. But over time, if you practice this, you can get really good at it in the moment. Right. And so, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of practice. So why don't we try an example of showing how to do it?
Here's an example. So, and this has happened to us. We're at dinner and we're with another couple and I'm sharing a story. My way of sharing a story is very generalized. Russ's way of sharing a story is very specific. It took us a while to catch on to this. But while I'm telling the story, I shared that something happened on a Tuesday, and Russ is correcting me and saying, no, it was Thursday. In my mind, I'm thinking the people who are listening to this really don't care what day it happened on, right?
And in my mind, I'm like, wait a minute, this is not right. It was Thursday, not Tuesday. But to her point, it's totally irrelevant. Right. But my brain doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Right. So there's a series of these type of corrections throughout the conversation that evening. And I'm just trying to maintain a happy face. And I'm just like, I can't wait to talk to him when we get in the car. Okay, so now I've given you an example of an incident that's happened. And fast forward to the weekly check-in. It's Saturday morning. We typically wake up late and end up going on a walk, and we do our weekly check-in during the walk. I personally like walking side by side instead of sitting confronting on this type of conversation.
So what we're going to do now with the weekly check-in is we're going to role play what not to do and then hopefully the healthy way to do this, okay? All right, here we go. So here we go. So hey honey, have I done anything or what have I done this week to hurt you or frustrate you or irritate you?
So remember the night at dinner when we went out to eat with that couple?
Oh yeah, on Tuesday night?
Yeah. And I was sharing a story and it felt like every time I brought up you know, whether it was on a Tuesday, you would correct me and say, no, it was a Thursday. And if I said it was a certain time, you said it was another time. And if you just kept correcting me through the dinner, and it was
No.
it was just really embarrassing.
No, I don't remember that at all. Seriously?
Yes, because I said, remember I said it was Tuesday, and you're like, no, it's a Thursday. Like, they don't care when it was.
I don't remember that at all. And if I did, I mean, Thursday is, if it was Thursday,
Okay.
remember?
Okay.
It was Thursday, it wasn't Tuesday.
Okay.
I mean, what are you, mad now? I guess I'm gonna get the silent treatment for 3 days. So anyway, that is how not to do it. But that's how we used to do it when we first
All
started.
the time. Except I wouldn't sit here. I would walk off.
Yeah, before we learned this, that was a pretty typical interaction. So now we're going to tell you how we actually handled this specific one, and we don't always get this right, but this is actually what we try to do, and usually accomplish most of the time. Okay, so now we're going to start on the weekly check-in again. Yeah, hey honey, this week what did I do, or what have I done that's hurt you or frustrated you or irritated you?
Well, I do have one incident.
Okay, that's all right.
When we went out to eat that night with that couple.
Oh, on Tuesday night?
Yeah. And remember, I was sharing a story, and
Mm-hmm.
I said it was on a Tuesday night, and you corrected me, it was Thursday night.
Oh,
And then
oh.
there was a certain time, and you corrected me on when the time was.
Ugh.
And I mean, it was embarrassing after a while.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I get so mad at myself when I do that, and I'm so sorry. I know that correcting you really embarrasses you. It would embarrass me if you corrected me like that, and I'm really, really sorry. Last thing I want to do is embarrass you, especially in front of our friends like that.
Yeah, because I think the difference is I share a story in general terms, and I don't think they care if it's on Thursday. I know you were right, it was on Thursday,
Yeah.
but I don't think they care, and so it's really hard for me to stay in the
Well,
conversation.
no, you're right. It's totally irrelevant whether it was to them, whether it was Tuesday or Thursday. It's my junk of wanting to be right all the time, and it's amazing how I can do it and not even realize I'm doing it. So I'm really, really sorry.
And that helps me to know that it's not like you're ready to pounce on me in the conversation, but it helps to know that it's just, you don't even realize you're doing it.
Yeah, what could we come up with that would help me, next time in that kind of scenario?
Something that would be huge, and I wouldn't want you to acknowledge it, is if my knee touches your knee. That means stop, but don't say, why is your knee touching my knee?
I think it'll be, oh no, I've done something wrong. But no, that's a great idea. Let's try that, because the last thing I want to do is correct you in front of people, because I know how embarrassing that must feel.
Yeah, because you're a great storyteller, and I feel like I'm not. So immediately when I hear you correct me, I think, oh, I shouldn't be, sharing the details of a story. So.
Well, I appreciate that you never seemed to act like anything was wrong. So I really appreciate that you didn't, take that out on me while we were there, or even when we got in the car. That means a lot to me.
Yeah. Thanks, honey.
So that's the way it's supposed to work. And once again, if we practice this, we can actually get there. And we feel so much closer afterwards, because there's a lot of care that comes through this. We care about our spouse. We're showing that what's important to them. We're showing, even if we don't agree with them, that we still care enough about their feelings that's more important than us being right. And that's taken a long time for me, because I love to be right.
And the big thing for me is I feel believed. Like before it would be like, well, no, it was a Thursday, and it was just like, okay, I know what was wrong, right? So the fact that you acknowledge my reality, my perspective, it does wonders for me. And it helps me get reconnected to him, because after that dinner, I didn't feel so connected.
Yeah, and so we'll talk about this in another webinar, how most of these negative interactions that we have with our spouse are based on bumping into each other's wounds and the way we look at things differently. So in that scenario, I like to be right, so my subconscious is constantly trying to correct things when they're wrong. For Danielle, she doesn't like to feel stupid because of a childhood wound, so to correct her in front of somebody, really, nobody likes to be corrected in front of others, but for her, it's a huge, huge deal. She feels horrible, even more so than most of us would. So we'll talk about that at another time. And then the last piece of this is we don't want to just finish on our frustrations. Boyd Whaley, our counselor that we've been with for years, that we've talked about a lot on our webinar, he had us add in the celebration. So we then ask, what have we done right this week? What have I done this week that's helped you or encouraged you? And so we share with each other, kind of like a brag of each other, right? So I'll brag on her and talk about what during the week really meant a lot to me, and then she'll do the same thing for me. And my love language is words of affirmation, so it's a big thing for me. And Danielle does a wonderful job from that perspective.
So why don't we just show them a celebration? So one for me would be, I know how hard moving is for you and how stressful it is. But when we moved in here, you were very engaged. You were so positive that I almost had to take a second take and say, Ross, is that you? And that meant the world to me because I was having so much fun, and I'm energized by a move where I know you're not.
Right.
And I'm trying to take on the logistics, but you actually stepped into the logistics and were helping, and that was really, really helpful.
Good. Well, I'm glad you felt that way because I really wanted this to be a great experience for you. And it's really hard for me because, as she says, moving is not my favorite thing to do, and I don't handle it very well. Yeah, I'm a routine person. But my brag on Danielle is kind of in the same context. As she is moving in, we decided to do a lot of work after we moved in, and so she has just for weeks now managed contractors almost on a daily basis, and just done a phenomenal job how she's managed the whole process, which has meant a ton to me because it's made it a lot, something I just dreaded, even though I didn't have to do a whole lot. I don't like inconvenience, and just having the whole house, a whirlwind is hard. And so she has made it really easy because of how well she's managed the process.
Thanks, honey. Thanks.
So what this does when we want to finish on these brags is it starts training our brain to think about the positive aspects and characteristics of our spouse. Our brain seems to always go to the negative for some reason. It's just trained to notice the negatives or imperfections in our spouse, but not the things that we do well. So to be intentional about bragging on our spouse to each other each week starts to train our brain to think about those things during the week subconsciously. So
Right.
give it a try.
I think there's a tendency to take the frustrations and think, they're small, let's just, sweep them under the rug. Don't. When you do this on a weekly basis, they're small, they're minor,
Right.
they don't build up over time, and they get dealt with right away. And just that simple exchange of sharing your frustrations and your celebrations, I have gone in mad to this discussion saying, I am not going to like him, no matter how hard he apologizes or whatever. I'm going to stay mad, and I'm telling you, I can't. It's that powerful of a process.
When you really care about your spouse's feelings, it's impossible not to be drawn to each other. So give it a try. I think it'll take practice. Stick with it. It's been one of the most rewarding and most impactful tools that we've learned in our marriage.
So we hope this has been helpful, and thank you for joining us.
Have a great night.